I'm Nora Baldner with KHQA. On March 20th, voters in the Quincy Public School District will decide whether the district can issue $6.2 million in working cash bonds. KHQA wants you to be informed before you go to the polls. The community forum you're about to see was sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Adams County and District 8 PTA and gave attendees a chance to have their questions answered by District Superintendent Director Lonny and District Business Manager Bud Martin.
The following question will be on the March 20 ballot, and voters may select yes or no. And the question is, shall the Board of Education of the Quincy School District number 172, Adams County, Illinois, be authorized to issue $6.2 million work bonds for a working cash fund as provided by Article 20 of the School Code? The procedure for issuing working cash bonds is a little different than other bonds. It's what's called a backdoor referendum, which I don't understand why you call it that. We put it on a public agenda, we talk about it in public session, we take a public vote, and if you miss all that, we put a notice in the paper to tell you what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, how it's going to work, and all that. But for some reason, it's called backdoor referendum. Voters have the opportunity, if they want to bring it to a vote, they can do so, and that's what's happened in this case, and that's why we're at the point we're here tonight. Went the wrong way, Dr. Lynn. Okay, the format, these are the frequently asked questions. There are just only about 8 or 10 of them. It won't take long to go through them, and hopefully as we go through, we'll answer some of the questions that you have ahead of time. Okay, Lonny. The first one, this is the most asked question in any of the presentations when we do it. Will the issue of the working cash bonds increase the tax rate? No, it will not. We'll be able to issue these bonds under the same tax rate that we have now. It's about a $4 tax rate. That's the overall rate. It's made up of about 7 or 8 smaller rates. We will simply, to make room in the bond fund for this rate, we'll simply adjust some others down for the time period. So the rate will not change by the issue of the $6.2 million in working cash bonds. What is the reason for issuing the working cash bonds? We have 2 ongoing debts. We've been addressing these debts on a year-to-year basis. One is a $2.1 million deficit in the ed fund. The other is a $4 million cash deficit in our checking account. The working cash bonds will eliminate the debts. They'll remove the need to borrow money each year, and they'll restore $30,000 to $40,000 annually to the ed fund. The ed fund is where we pay for instruction, supplies, equipment, instruction for kids, and we're paying interest out of that one. The amount of the 2 debts is $6,133,918. Is there a cost to issuing the working cash bonds? Yes. When you borrow money, there's always a cost to borrowing money. Depending on what the interest rates would end up being, the issuance fees and the interest would be maybe from $500,000 to $600,000. We are already paying interest on those debts. We've been paying interest on those debts. We've been handling them like a credit card. When you max out a credit card and all you pay is the interest and you never touch the principal, that's what we're trying to get away from. We're trying to handle both the interest and the principal and make the debt go away. This slide I added. It's not going to be on the sheet you have. These are things that have come up as we've done these presentations, and I think they help understand why we're doing what we're doing. How does the district benefit by issuing these bonds? There's a lot of ways that we benefit. First of all, we take advantage of some very low interest rates. Those of you that have refinanced your homes recently, you've seen interest rates on mortgages at below 3%. Same thing is true for school district. We've been able to borrow money at very low interest rates, which hasn't been available in the past. Second thing is we can offset any interest on these working cash bonds with interest savings from the refinance of some bonds that we did last month. We had some bonds that were issued in 2002 at a higher interest rate. We simply refinanced them. We didn't extend the time to pay them out or anything, just changed the interest rate. The savings and interest over the payout of those bonds will offset any additional interest that we're going to pay on these working cash bonds. Understand, we're still paying interest now year to year on that short-term loan. We will address all of the negative issues on our financial report that we receive from the state each year. We receive a designation. It's either financial recognition, financial warning, or financial watch. It's based on factors like, do you have fund balances in each fund? Do you have cash balances? Are you short-term borrowing? Are you exceeding your debt limit? Are you balancing your budget? Issuing these bonds will address many of those. It'll get us a cash balance in the bank. It'll eliminate the deficit in the ed fund, and it'll eliminate the short-term borrowing. 3 factors that are negative that go into our annual financial rating. That's one of the reasons we're on the financial watch list. It will eliminate paying interest from the education fund. As I told you earlier, in education, when we borrow money and pay interest, our financial system is designed to do that out of the debt service fund so that it doesn't take money away from instruction. It doesn't take money away from maintaining buildings. It doesn't take money away from transportation. It's for instruction. By selling these bonds, we eliminate that deficit in the ed fund. We eliminate the need for the short-term borrowing, and we don't pay interest out of the ed fund and take money away from instruction. We address the issues that are identified on the state board's letter to us that are going to certify us in financial difficulty if we're not proactive. It's the same things that occur on the annual financial report. Do we have cash balances? Do we have positive fund balances? Are we doing any short-term borrowing? Those same factors, and this will eliminate all of those. So a lot of positives occur, more than simply filling in those 2 debts. A lot of positives occur for the district financially. We improved our bond rating last month when we refinanced those bonds quite a bit, and by what we did the year before. For us to go any further, to further improve that bond rating, we're going to have to do things like eliminate the deficits, quit borrowing money on a short-term basis. This will help us do all of those things. Will issuing these bonds create an additional indebtedness for the taxpayer? No. These debts already exist. They've existed for several years. They're carried over year to year to year. What it really does, it just changes on how we're going to address the debt. As I told you earlier, we're not doing anything about the debt at this point. We're just paying interest. And we're doing it out of the ed fund. By doing the working cash bonds, we will eliminate the debt, and we will do it out of the debt service fund. Will issuing the bonds extend our indebtedness? No. We'll still pay out the bonds at the same time. The current bonds we have are due to pay out in 2017, 2018. They'll still do that. Sometimes when you borrow, you know, in order to get something done, you extend the payments out longer. We're not doing that. Sometimes you up the tax rate. We're not doing that. What is the district's current bonded indebtedness? We put this slide up because we had questions about how deep in debt is the Board of Education, or is the district. Usually whenever the state board talks to districts about being in financial difficulty and having cash flow issues and having deficits in ed funds, they're also talking about a district that has borrowed to the hilt. They have no place to get money to address any of that. That's not our situation in Quincy. We're only using about 25% of what we can legally borrow in this district to generate funds when we need them. $27 million sounds like a lot of money. It's a lot of money in my house, I can tell you that. But we have a limit of $108 million. And we operate a budget annually that's between $70 and $80 million. So the numbers sometimes seem big, but when you compare them to what we're doing each year, it kind of puts them in perspective. This is one of the key issues. Will issuing the working cash bonds balance the budget? No. They never were intended to. We never told you they would. They weren't designed to do that. The budget is a separate issue. The budget deals with year to year. A budget comes to life on July 1st of each year. It dies on June 30th, and it's gone. It's only about how much money you raise that year, how much money you spend that year. It's not an issue of the things we're talking about. So it does not balance the budget. It's not a budget issue. The board deals with that in a separate manner. And finally, are the working cash bonds the only solution being considered? No. And this is a really important issue. This is really key to the district and to the community. The board has been working since probably November on a deficit reduction plan, as we're going to be required to do by the state. Deficit reduction plan is probably not the best name for it, as Ed pointed out this morning, because it's more than dealing with a deficit. It's more like a financial management plan. This deficit reduction plan will be designed to say we are here financially, and by 4 years from now, 3 years from now, we're going to be here. We're going to manage the budget each year. It's about budgeting. We're going to manage the budget. We're going to manage the revenue. We're going to manage the expenditures. in our 4 operating funds over these 4 years in such a manner that we go from this point where they currently have a collective negative balance to this point where they collectively will have a positive balance in all of those funds. So the deficit reduction plan is about budgeting. The board is working on that. They're close to finishing it, we hope, and hopefully in the very near future they'll be ready to talk about that in open session at a board meeting and take action on it. That's pretty much the questions we've had. The last slide I want to show you is a quote, "There's no such thing as a perfect solution. Every solution, no matter how good, is going to generate more questions and possibly create more problems. But that's not a reason to not seek a solution, and that's what we're trying to do." I want to thank you very much for listening, and again, we appreciate you being here. We respect your right to choose as you see fit to choose. We won't tell you how to choose, but we do appreciate you taking the effort and the time to find out about what's going on in the district.
Okay, we would like to take your questions. If you would please line up in front of the microphone. If you are camera shy, you can write down your question in the back, and we will get those up to the front and asked as well. So please, I encourage you to come forward and please state your full name and ask your question. Surely we have people with questions.
The first question, how much does the state owe the school district? Do you expect that it will eventually be paid?
Well, I think that varies day to day. You know, at one point, I think when we last had this question a couple weeks ago, Bud, it was somewhere between $3 and $4 million, I think was the goal, and that does vary. We have been waiting this year for what we call our mandated categorical payments. We usually get 4 of those each year, quarterly, and we hadn't received any until it was a Friday, about 2 weeks ago now, when we did receive our first of our 4 mandated categorical payments. I think that the press has done a nice job of covering that for us. Last year we received, this year we received 2. We got our second payment, so we ended up getting half of what I know the district should have gotten last year, and we received those monies in this actual fiscal year. Our hope would be obviously to get all 4. The track record, as you know, for the state's not been very good, to be quite honest. So, you know, we budgeted accordingly based on last year's record. So we're cautiously optimistic that we will receive at least 2 of our 4 payments. We've got 1 in the bank this year. You know, as you know, one of the big risks that the gamble that the board took last year was in our early childhood program, being a grant funded, and that is we're unfortunately haven't been able to say we haven't received any of the early childhood monies yet for this year. Bud, you want to add anything to that?
No, Lonnie gave a good explanation. We receive money from the state basically in 2 ways. The first way is through the general state aid claim. We get 2 checks a month. We're supposed to get it for 12 months to get 24 checks. This year we're going to get 22 and a half, and the last half one's going to be prorated. But that money has come in pretty regularly. That's based on our average daily attendance. It's called general state aid. The other way we get money is through categoricals. That's funding for money that we spend on programs like special ed, transportation, early childhood. That money we usually get quarterly. Currently with the state is 2 quarters behind on their funding, which is about $4 million for the district. They are completely behind in early childhood. We received none of the early childhood money that we were supposed to get. So on the revenue side, no matter how well we budget, that always creates a problem because we expect some income and we try to be conservative in what we expect, but we're getting even less from the state than what we expected to get.
I understand the current line of credit is costing about $30,000 to $35,000 per year in interest, about the salary of 1 teacher. The working cash bond, I understand the cost would be about 3.5%, or about $217,000 in the first year, or 7 teachers. Is this correct, the interest of the working cash bond?
I will go with that person's math. I think what the person is getting at is trying to make a comparison between interest we pay on the line of credit and interest we pay on doing away with the debts. It's like apples and oranges. The answer is yes, we're going to pay more interest in the 5-year period on the working cash bonds than we'll pay in interest over the next 5 years on the line of credit. The difference is at the end of the 5 years, the debt is gone. It's paid. That's all we're going to pay. It's a finite amount of money we're going to pay. Doing it under the line of credit, we will pay that $30,000 to $40,000 a year in interest for the next 5 years, and at the end of the 5 years, we'll still owe the $4 million. And so if we do the same thing the next 5, we'll still owe it again and again and again. So the math is correct in that, yeah, if you look at it that way, you're going to pay less interest in the next 5 years. One way, you're solving the problem. One way, you're postponing it.
Is it a simple majority vote to pass this referendum?
Yes, I believe that's our understanding. It's simple majority vote. I think there's actually, we were told at the last meeting that there's actually early voting starts, I believe, February 27th and runs through the 15th.
What is the difference in fees for a line of credit versus the proposed working cash bond of $6.2 million?
The fees for doing working cash bonds is going to be greater than the fees for the line of credit. The line of credit is usually done with a local bank. It's a low interest rate. There's not a lot of legal steps to go through for the line of credit. When you sell bonds, that's like doing a mortgage for your home. It's a bigger legal process. There are more fees involved. We just did $13 million worth of bonds when we refinanced 2002 bonds, and I think the total cost of fees and all that stuff was around $200,000. I don't know what the fee will be on the line of credit, but it's a very small amount.
Why doesn't the school board just cut the budget to eliminate the need for working cash bonds? Families must live within our means.
Well, the working cash bonds are not to fix the budget. Not selling the working cash bonds or selling the working cash bonds is not going to fix the budget. I think that's an important point that we need for everyone to understand. The deficit reduction plan that the board is looking at and what they're doing with programs, personnel, and all that year to year, that's the budget. That's where they control what happens year to year. So I hope that we make that clear.
My name is John Ternier. I'm from Quincy, Illinois. I hesitate to ask the first question, but is this my only question that I get, or am I going to get more? Okay. Okay. My understanding is that the reason why we have a deficit in the educational fund is because the Quincy Public Schools has repeatedly over the years spent more money out of education fund than we've taken in. And so now we have a $4.2 million deficit?
Well, we have a $2.1 million fund deficit, and we have a $4 million cash deficit in the checkbook.
Why are we not just selling $4.2 million in working cash bonds? Well, why are we selling 6.2, which, by the way, will raise our indebtedness from $27.5 million to $33.5, or close to that?
Well, you already owe that. It's just not shown in your bonded indebtedness. Okay. The debt is already there. The authorization from the vote is to issue up to $6.2 million in working cash bonds. That would eliminate the ed fund deficit. It would also eliminate the need, the $4 million a year. The board doesn't have to sell all $6.2 million if they choose not to.
Are they just then creating a fund out of which they have discretionary spending over the next few years?
No.
Is that, okay. Then the next question I have is that I heard you talking about the board working on a budget management thing, and that they're going to come out with some kind of way to reduce this deficit over the next few years. My question is why that wasn't done first before you asked me to vote for working cash bonds. Well, in other words, am I going to vote for this on the basis of a promise that you're going to do that, or I'm just confused there.
Yeah, and I understand that. No, you're talking about two different deficits. The reason for the deficit reduction plan and the reason the state board is requiring it is because the four operating funds combined, ed fund, building fund, transportation, and working cash, for a 2-year period had a total negative balance. The deficit reduction plan addresses all four of those. It brings all four of those, the total of those, to a positive balance. The deficit in the ed fund itself, that's what the working cash is for. Let me relate it like to a sinking ship. Your ship is sinking, it's taking on water, it's turning on the side. Whenever we balanced the budget last year, that stops the leaking. The working cash issue would set the boat upright, but that's all it would do. For it to stay upright and continue to float, then this deficit reduction plan has to work over a period of time to keep everything going that way. Otherwise, you go right back in the
Then you understand my problem is I'd like
Yes,
for
sir.
that plan to be in place and beginning to work on it, and then I'd be behind you 100%. But I have a problem with that because it sounds to me like I'm being promised that, and I have no assurance that it's really going to happen, and then the board is going to have $2 million sitting there to use for whatever they want to use it for. That's a statement, not a question.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. I may have another one later.
That's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
It's okay.
Yep.
How does per pupil expenditure in our district compare to the rest of Illinois?
Well, this came up in the last forum we had at the church a couple weeks ago, and it was related, how do we stack up compared to the nation? And I think it's very difficult, to compare us. We're slightly below and not having that information. I guess the easy answer would be is that anybody could go onto the school district website, and there's a link to the State Board of Education, isbe.net, and you can check our school report card and all of that information for not only ours, but you can find that on any school district in the state. So you could look at the exact numbers. And everybody has different circumstances because of the grants that come in, and then of course you got the elephant in the room, the city of Chicago and Chicago Public Schools and how they skew all of our data. I think we're very regionally competitive. I think that's the most important. But to be able to look at the exact numbers, to have them exact, I don't have those exact numbers, but I think it's really, really difficult to compare us to other districts because we have, we have foundation giving us money, we have grants that we're infusing into the district. But overall, I think we're right in the ballpark, and I think that it's very fair to say that the students in this district and the taxpayers in this district are getting a lot of bang for their buck for the education that we're providing on a daily basis from our teaching staff.
What exactly are the two ongoing debts for which there is annual short-term bonds? What is the plan to keep the debt from recurring?
Well, the two debts, one is a fund balance debt. I wish I had a good explanation of fund balance versus cash balance. I've heard it from many experts. I've heard it in classes. I've tried to explain it, and I've just never heard a really good explanation. But a fund balance is like a historical record of that fund from the time it was instituted. And the ed fund is $2 million in debt from the beginning of time. The cash balance is just the money in the checkbooks, just like your checkbook at home. You start out with so many dollars in there at the beginning of the month, and you got so many left at the end of the month. We're starting the year each year $4 million short. That's why we have to do the short-term borrowing. The working cash will eliminate both of those. It will eliminate both. It'll bring, if the $6.2 million is sold and it's put into the ed fund, then the deficit is gone in the ed fund. That brings that fund balance up to zero, where it should be, and it puts the $4 million cash in the bank, and we don't have to borrow that line of credit, and we won't have to pay it back next fall as we do each fall. So that's what it does. How do we know we're not going to get back there? That's the question we keep getting asked repeatedly, and that is the one, that's the deficit reduction plan. That is the financial management piece that the board is working on, which says that we are here today, and we're going to take steps to get here tomorrow. And it's a very, very important thing. They've worked very hard at it, and it's going to be public. Mr. Was it Tornier? Am I getting that right? That's a good question. And they've worked on it. It's not a promise. It's something that we have to do because of the designation as being in financial difficulty by the Illinois State Board.
What I think it is fair to say is that if you look at least the history of what the board has accomplished in the 4 years I've been here and superintendent, you know, they've been very, very good stewards over the district's money, considering the fact that, you know, if we only received 2 of last year's 4 mandated categorical payments, and it's looking like at best we're going to receive only 2 of this year's mandated categoricals, you know, it doesn't take much more than the 5th grader to realize that we will have lost a total year's funding from the state of Illinois, and yet we're going to be on track for our year-to-year budget to balance. And I think that that's just, you know, shown great stewardship. The board, in the 4 years I've been here, they've had to make some really, really difficult decisions to try to make that happen. And you know, I know Mr. Daniels is sitting back there, and he's probably got in his book, you know, each year we do financial projections with PMA, and I think it's probably fair to say that, you know, right now we are, you know, $2.2 million upside down in the ed fund. The PMA projections 5 years ago, where we would be today, had the board not been good stewards of your money and made those adjustments these last 3 years, I think the predictions, if you would pull those out from 5 years ago, would say that we would probably have been on course to be $15 million upside down. So you know, my hat's off to the men and women on the board in my 4 years here to trying to keep us, you know, even in that boat upright, Bud, because we didn't expect the collapse in 2008. None of us did, whether it's just school districts or pharmacies or hospitals or whatever have been. But you know, I think the board has been very, very, very good stewards. I don't think that they're going to change overnight. So you know, when people ask this question, what is the promise? What is the promise that the board won't do the same? Is I think the best thing you can look at is what have they done these past 3 years, and that's been significantly great work of stewardship financially for the district to even keep us afloat. So I guess there is, you know, none of us have a crystal ball, and we can't make that promise 100%. You know, I had that question last time, is, you know, I drove here tonight, you know, and I'm going to drive home. There's no guarantee I'm going to make it home safely, but I'm still going to drive home. And I think, you know, Bud gave us a quote earlier this year, and I've used that before, and those who heard me say the thing last time is, before you can trust a man, you have to trust a man. And I think that the board has been good stewards, and you have to trust them that they are online to try to do the right things to right our ship.
My name is Lyle Nichols. I think both you gentlemen have said that the education fund is either $2 or $3 or $4 million short. If this happened in my family, I'd have to cut expenses. Why doesn't the school board do that?
Well, whenever they complete their deficit reduction plan, Mr. Nichols, there's only 2 ways to fix it: either increase revenue or decrease expenditures. That's exactly what will be included in that plan. One of those.
Another question I have is, why did it take until now to have this deficit reduction plan? Doesn't the board have vision where they say, here's our plan for the next 5 years? Most organizations that I've worked for have like a 5 or 10-year plan to know where your money is coming from and how much you're going to spend. Well, I can't imagine the school board doesn't do that.
And I'm sure they do. This plan, what precipitated this plan was we saw this coming when we saw that the cumulative balance in those 4 operating funds were in the negative for consecutive years. And that's school code. When that happens, we knew that the state board would visit us, and we knew that they would require the deficit reduction plan. That's why the timing of the plan now.
Yeah. I think in another question, you mentioned, if I understood it correctly, that this $500,000 or $600,000 for the working cash bond isn't going to cost the district any money, but isn't it going to cost us as taxpayers? We're going to be paying that, aren't we?
It's not any money you're not already obligated to pay. You have a debt. You have 2 existing debts you have to pay. If you can't pay them, you're going to have to pay interest on them until you do pay them.
But if we didn't have the working cash bonds, we wouldn't be paying the $500,000 or $600,000.
Well, you tell me, how long are you going to keep paying $30,000 a year and never pay on the principal? You're going to have that debt until you pay it. So, you know, over the next 5 years, you'll pay more interest doing the working cash bonds than if you don't. But if you do the line of credit, you still have the debt at the end of the 5 years. So then you got 5 more years of that interest, and then 5 more, and 5 more, and 5 more.
So it sounds like we're never getting ahead of the problem.
Well,
that's what concerns me the most, is that I don't think we're making any progress.
That was the previous way of addressing it. That's why we proposed the working cash bonds. That's what we're saying. This is a better tool for handling that debt than what we've been doing. That's all we're saying. In finance for education, we have various tools for solving problems. The tool that has been used for the past several years is to not pay the principal and just pay interest every year out of the ed fund. We're saying there's a better tool than that. The better tool is to sell the working cash, pay that debt off in 5 years, and be done with it.
But will that solve the problem, or will we have more debt in
It'll
2 or
solve
3
that
or
problem, yes, sir.
But we may incur more debt then.
Well, that's the other piece, and that's what we've made a point to separate. And thank you very much for understanding that. The working cash is about those existing debts, getting those filled in, getting rid of them. From that point on, if we're level, we start at zero. From that point on, it's up to us to manage the finances in a way that we don't go back into debt. You're exactly right.
Okay. Does the school board issue tax anticipation warrants?
That's what
a lot of local governments do.
That's what the line of credit is every year.
Okay, that's just another name for it.
Yeah, and what that means, and when we talk about tax anticipation warrants, what that means is that we spend the money this year. The next year, when we get the tax money in July and August for the next year, we have to take $4 million of it, or whatever we borrowed, and pay it over here. So we start out the year $4 million short again, and that's what we've done over time.
And one of the things the tax anticipation warrants, Mr. Nichols, is I'm very grateful that the banks in this community have been willing to do that for us. Typically, if you do a TAW, the tax anticipation warrants, you have to guess, I need $4 million, and then you pay that up front and pay the interest all along, whereas in the line of credit, we don't have to access until we need it, which helps us save interest. So I'm very grateful to the lending institutions in Quincy to allow us to do it that way.
Well with the school district over the years. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I warned you.
That's okay.
I just needed something clarified. You've been talking about a fund balance and a cash balance.
Yes.
Now, my understanding of a fund balance is, does this district keep its books on an accrual basis or a cash basis?
Cash basis.
Okay. Then a fund balance, my understanding is on an accrual basis, is a balance that exists on a certain date based upon what you have, what you're entitled to get, and what you're obligated to pay. In other words, it stretches forward into the future, correct? Whereas a cash balance is what I have on hand today.
I'm going to yield to you on that one. I don't speak accountanese, and,
Okay.
and I, like I said in the beginning, I've heard several explanations. I've tried to explain it. I know that I can't explain it well. I know that it's two separate things.
Okay. Okay. So would it be better for us to just talk one or the other? And I don't mean to criticize, but I think it's confusing when we talk about a cash balance versus a fund balance, because the reality is that if we're keeping our books on a cash basis, then that's what we should, that's what we should be working with. And you told me that the cash balance was a negative $4 million.
$4 million
in the
short.
ed fund.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thank you for
Yeah.
that. I appreciate that.
Maybe this would help you. Let's say that the working cash issue passed, and the district gets the $6.2 million. $4 million will immediately go into the checkbook
Yes.
for the ed fund for that $4 million. Now, the $2.1 million that's remaining, the board would really have two options. They could go ahead and put it directly into the ed fund at that moment and eliminate that ed fund deficit. They could just leave it sitting in working cash, and if their financial management plan works, at the end of the 5 years, they may have that deficit down and have that cash available for what working cash is supposed to be available for. Working cash is supposed to be an in-house bank, so you don't have to go outside and borrow money when times are tough, and you don't have to pay interest. That's the purpose of it.
That working cash money that's in that working cash fund, can that be used for building?
It can be used anywhere.
Anywhere. Okay. Thank you.
We have very few sources of money that is really unrestricted. Working cash is one of those.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have kind of a wrap-up question, unless anyone else has anything. Okay.
Great.
My name is Jerry Holzcraft, and
Jerry.
Mr. Martin, I'd like to take you up on your comments you have on the board here yet, okay?
Okay.
Where it says, every solution, no matter how good, creates new problems.
Yep.
What type of ideas or problems have you envisioned could possibly occur?
Well, I'm an optimist, so I don't really think it's going to. I think every solution has the potential to create a different set of problems. I think the way I kind of made a hybrid of the quote was it generates questions and can possibly create more problems. I don't particularly see any. I think the board is working on both sides of the issue that keeps coming up. I think the working cash, they're dealing with those two deficits that we currently have, and I think through the deficit reduction plan that they're working hard on, they're addressing the issue of what's going to happen next. Are we going to be able to manage this in a way that we don't go back in the same hole? So I think both sides are being addressed.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Hi, my name's Krista Rankin, and I guess my question is, you've made a couple of comments about the $30,000 to $40,000 that's coming out of the educational fund. You've made a couple of comments a couple of times that you're not paying on the principal.
No.
Why?
We're just paying on the interest. That's what the interest is each.
And I guess if we are not going to be paying anything extra, how can the $6.2 million then get rid of the principal in 7 years if we're not paying anything different?
Well, the $6.2 million will put cash in those funds and eliminate those deficits. They pay the principal, and then we'll make payments just like you do over 5 years to pay off a loan, and they're gone. What we're doing now is all we're doing is just paying interest and reborrowing the money each year, and with the deficit in the ed fund and the cash deficit, we don't have any extra money at the end of the year to pay towards the principal. So the working cash pays that debt.
I guess I don't understand. What's the difference of us having the two debts of $6.1 million per your sheet versus the $6.2 million? I mean, it's still almost $6.2 million. Why aren't we paying anything on the principal?
We don't have any money in the ed fund to pay it. That's
then
what.
How is the $6.2 million cash fund going to eliminate us all of a sudden being able to pay principal?
We're going to borrow literally $6.2 million. Let's see if we can relate it to your home. Let's say you bought a car.
Okay.
And you paid $10,000 for the car, and you're supposed to make payments each month to pay off the car over 5 years. Well, when you get the car bought and you get home, you start making payments, you can't afford the payments. So you work with the bank, and all you can do is pay the interest. And so for 5 years you pay the interest, but at the end of the 5 years you still owe the $10,000 on the car because you didn't have money to pay on the debt itself. What we're doing, we're in the same shape, but in order to fix that, we're going to a different source. We're going to the bond. We're going to sell bonds, which is the same as borrowing money, and we're going to pay for the whole car, and then we're going to pay interest and principal back to this second lender over here.
But we already have debts of $6.1 million.
Yeah.
If we're just, I feel like it's just a shell game.
No.
That you're taking the money that's over here and now borrowing here.
We're moving how we're going to pay for it so we can pay the principal and the interest. Where we're doing it now, we don't have any money to pay on the principal. We're just paying the interest. When we move to the bond fund, we can sell enough bonds that will pay that debt off, and all we'll be doing is paying back this $6.2 million loan, and we'll be paying the principal and the interest.
I guess I just don't understand how the difference between $6.1 million and cash fund bonds that we have in the two debts, replacing it with a 6.2 bond is going to all of a sudden give us $30,000 to $40,000.
Because we're not paying out of the ed fund anymore. We're not paying anything out of the ed fund.
So where's that $30,000 to $40,000 now?
It's gone. It's gone. It's back in the ed fund. It's just money in the ed fund available for instruction. We're handling the debt and the interest over here in the debt service fund. And we're paying both. We're paying.
So you're moving the money from one pot to another pot. So it's a shell game.
No, we don't have the money in another pot. That's why we're selling the bonds.
You're moving the debt from one pot to another.
Yes, so that we can pay the debt. We're not paying the debt now. We're just paying interest every year.
What's our interest rates now?
It varies. It can be anywhere from 2% to 2.5%.
And what's the interest on the 6.2 million?
The bonds we just sold, 13 million, the interest rate was right at 3%.
If it's higher percentage rate, how can you pay more principal?
Because we're doing it out of the bond fund. The bond fund, how can I explain it? The bond,
I'm just trying to. I mean, if I go by the if I go by the $10,000 car,
right.
If I have interest at 1.5% versus 3% interest, my payments are going to be higher on the 3%. You just told me the interest now on the 6.133 million is less than the 6.2. So how come we're not paying principal when we're going to be paying higher interest on the 6.2?
We don't have any money to pay the principal out of the ed fund. We don't have any money. It's taking all the money we have in the ed fund to pay for those costs that are related to instruction and pay that interest each year. We don't have any extra money to pay on the principal whatsoever. It's like we've charged up a credit card and we can't pay on the balance on the card, we're just paying the interest. When we go to the debt service fund, we can sell bonds where a lender, where this money over here is a debt that we've incurred over time. It's in our cash, in our checking account, and in our fund balance. We have that debt over here. It's not like that. It's not like we borrowed it. We're making a payment on it. We just have the debt. We can't afford to do anything with it. So we borrow short term, fill the debt. All we can do is pay the interest. Then we have to do the same thing every year. We're never touching it. When we go to the bond fund, we can sell bonds. We can raise enough money to pay that money back into these funds where that debt is eliminated over here. It doesn't exist anymore. Now we borrowed $6.2 million and we're going to pay it back in the debt service fund where we can generate enough money each year to make a principal payment and interest payment and make the debt go away in 5 years.
And how is that money generated? Is that your question?
I guess I'm still not understanding how a 1.5% interest, 2% interest on 6.13 million is costing us more than 3.5% interest on 6.2 million.
Does it have to do with time and interest rates and origination of the money? Is that what you're asking?
I mean, I'm just trying to understand when they're telling me that the cost, the amount of two debts is $6.133 million, and you told me that the interest rate is 1.5%, 2.5%. But if we borrow $6.2 million to wipe out these debts, it's now 3.5%. How is that saving us money?
Because the first way, we're never paying off the debt. There's no end to paying that interest. We'll just keep paying it every year forever, I guess. There's no end to it.
But then we're going to have more money because if we are paying $6.2 million and the interest at 3.5 versus the 6, why aren't we paying it on this principal at 6.1 and 1.5% interest?
We don't have 6.1 million, that 6.13 borrowed over here. We do a line of credit every year of $6 million. We use some portion of it, and then we have to pay it back. We usually use about $4 million of it. We pay interest for a few months on that $4 million. The 2.1 fund deficit just carries over and over and over. The difference is, in the bond fund, we can borrow that lump sum of money and fill those two holes, and then we can make interest and principal payments out of the bond fund to eliminate the debt. That's the difference. Over here, we're not eliminating anything. All we're doing is carrying the debt over year after year after year and just paying the interest. Over here, we eliminate the debt. We actually pay the bill.
Okay, well, I still don't understand how this does, and maybe you can explain it to me later.
Okay, I'll think and see if I can come up with a better explanation for you.
I have one more question.
Okay.
You had indicated at the beginning that if you pass this $6.2 million bond fund or working cash bond, that my taxes won't go up.
No.
That you'll continue to levy at about $4. I'm curious as to how that is possible, because if you didn't pass the $6.2 million bond fund, are my taxes going to go down?
No.
Okay, the reality is that the way you raise the money in the working cash fund is to levy for that money. And so if you have to levy to pay off that $6.2 million, isn't there at least going to have to be an increase in my tax rate to pay the interest?
No.
Okay, I don't understand how that works.
I'm going to explain it. I'm going to explain it to you. We had this conversation the first year I was in Quincy when we were doing the tax levy. This $4 tax rate is made up of about 7 or 8 small individual rates. Some of those rates are preset that we cannot change without voter approval.
Right.
Some of those rates are arbitrary that the board can set without asking anybody, and then in the middle is working cash where it's kind of a cooperative thing. We can or we can't depending on petition. So what we do is in the funds that have an arbitrary rate that the district can set, we estimate the amount of money that's needed in those funds each year. Over time, we have to levy a little more because we don't know the exact dollar, and a balance builds up in those funds. That's tort, IMRF, Social Security. What we will do to accommodate these bonds is when we sell these bonds, we'll raise the bond rate enough for those bonds, but we'll borrow a few pennies off of each of those other 3 rates for a 3-year period so that it fits in the $4.
So no matter what happens, I'm stuck with a $4 tax rate.
I don't know.
Because you're going to increase the rate in those other funds in order to make up for not getting the working cash bonds? Is that what's going to happen?
No.
Or?
No, you asked about how I was going to do the working cash bonds and not raise the overall
I know
rate.
If you sell them, you're going to levy for that. Are you taking the interest out of these other funds?
No. No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the bond fund rate this much, but I'm going to lower these 3 rates over here the same amount so that it stays at $4 because I have a balance in those funds. I can under levy in those funds for a 2 or 3 year period, and then it'll balance back out, and it's going to stay right around $4.
Well, I wish I knew more, because I'd take a look at it and I'd think about maybe doing it a little differently.
Yeah.
But I thank you for answering my question.
Thank you.
Do you have a question in the back? Okay.
Hi, my name is Warren Ellis. I'm a resident here in Quincy. I appreciate you being here tonight. I understand your desire to level the ship, as it were. But that ship's in fairly treacherous waters. It appears to me. There's shoals and any number of unknowns that are coming your way as well. There's been discussions about pensions, other bonds that may have to be incurred.
Can you speak closer to the microphone?
Yeah, I'll try. It's not very sensitive, but I'll try. Normally I can be heard pretty well. Are there other bonds that are going to mature, be retired in the period of time that these bonds are in place? And can the funds that would be used to pay those bonds be then applied to this to shorten the term on the bonds that you're asking about here?
Just so that everyone in the back can hear, are there other bonds that are going to mature, and can you take the payments paying off those bonds right now and transfer them to debt in the future? Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, exactly.
No, whenever we sell bonds, they're sold for a specific purpose, and they have to be used for that purpose. The bonds that are going to pay out in 2017, 2018, once they pay out, we can't continue to collect that tax rate on those bonds once they're paid and pay something else with them. It'd be the same process. We would have to get permission from the voter, unless like health, life, safety. But for these type of bonds, we'd have to get permission from the voter to sell those bonds, set the rate to pay for those bonds.
Mm-hmm. I share this gentleman's concern about the willingness to balance budgets. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very tenuous proposition. It's a very difficult proposition in my limited experience. I would encourage you to do so. And I appreciate the fact that you say you plan to do so. But I also believe that, with discussions about portions of pension costs being passed down to school districts from the state, the tenuous position that the state of Illinois finds itself in, unknown how they're going to bring their budgets into alignment. But the expectation is, I think if you follow the media, is that education is going to be impacted negatively through whatever the state has to do. So I appreciate you answering questions tonight. I'm much more informed than I was when I got here tonight. But I do have concerns, as this gentleman expressed, about the willingness of this board in some future period to take on that financial plan and actually put it into place. Thank you.
Hi, Jeff Kirkhoff from here in Quincy. I just had one quick follow-up question because there was a mention about the refinance that you recently had. You had a refinance earlier. Now suppose this doesn't pass. You're going to be saving money from the refinance. Can that be applied to either A, lowering taxes, or B, spending money for programs, or C, a combination of both? So if this doesn't go through, won't you have more funds available? As a result of this refinance, I understand you lowered the rate. I'm going from memory. I know you're at 3.42 now. I think you were at around 5.25 roughly, something like that, and dropping
the interest rate
refinance, yeah, to 3.42 on those bonds that you refinanced. So couldn't that be used if this doesn't go through? The savings on that could either be used to either drop the levy by about 20 cents, or instead of doing that, just use that money to cover for teachers or programs.
Well, when we refinanced the bonds, Jeff, we didn't change the terms of the bonds,
right,
the length of them, so they're exactly the same. They will pay out at the same time. So no, it doesn't affect any of that. At the time and point that they pay out, then yes, the bond rate may or may not go down. Depends on what is on the horizon for the district at that point, whether you're looking at a capital development program, whether you're looking at health, life, safety issues, or whatever you're looking at. But none of this affects what was going to occur before. Remember, we didn't extend the time.
Right, but you lowered the rate.
We did. All we're doing is saving interest.
Exactly.
But we're still levying the same amount of money. We're still paying those bonds out in that short amount of time.
But wouldn't an option be either one or two, or a combination of, since you have less money, you have less expense because you lowered the rate from about 5 something to 3.42, you could theoretically take that money, either A, lower the rate by about 20 cents, from by $4 to 3.8, or instead just use that money and spend it on teachers or programs. It seems like otherwise the question is, where's that money going?
No, we can't do it. It's bond money. It's not ed fund money. We can't spend that money on anything but retiring bonds. That's it.
Okay.
So we can't shift it, and nothing's going to occur differently than occurred before. Those bonds are going to pay out in 2016, 2017. In that time frame, the bond rate's going to drop from 65 cents down to whatever when those bonds pay out, depending on what happens in that interim. And
so you couldn't lower then the other
not
possibility?
At this point.
You could not lower the tax rate by the 20 cents.
Not right
to
now.
offset for that reduction.
Not right now.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sure you're familiar with about the 800 so school districts that are in the state of Illinois. And I know that according to state law, every school is allowed to borrow a certain percentage of its total EAV, tax base. How would you classify Quincy's borrowing record with respect to the other 800 school districts in the state? Are we conservative? Are we flamboyant? Do we tend to have a level head when it comes to using our full borrowing capacity?
To the audience, I'd like to introduce Carol Nichols.
Well, I can't speak for every district in Illinois. I can only speak for Quincy. When we were dealing with the state board and we're talking about the deficit reduction plan, the question they ask us is, why are you just looking at $6 million? Why aren't you looking at this, or this? It relates to one of the first slides I showed you. We have borrowing capacity under our EAV of almost $108 million, and we're currently at about 26 million, just barely tapping what our borrowing power is. What that says is that Quincy, over time, has been conservative about issuing bonds and selling bonds, borrowing money in that manner.
So we have a record, a long-standing record of fiscal prudence, correct?
Well, I haven't been here a long time, but the indications are you do, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I don't see anyone standing up. Has everyone had their questions? That's fine.
Fire away.
And I should have touched on this earlier.
That's okay.
And you had mentioned refinancing bonds. Is there anything to prevent the Board of Education from refinancing the $6.2 million of working cash bonds over a longer period of time in order to have a lower payout each year? Or I think you've used that solution.
Well, typically, if you borrow money, the quicker you pay it off, the less interest you have to pay.
Obviously, yeah.
That's one of the things. And the other thing was we wanted to protect that window that's going to occur in 2016-17, where we have an opportunity to do something special in this community. We'll have the opportunity if we want to go to any type of capital development program, we can do it under our current tax rate. It doesn't happen very often to a community. Usually when you talk about building a building or major renovations, things like that, you have to bump the tax rate up. If we protect that window and we pay these out in that 5-year period, that window is going to be there for the community.
Has the board previously refinanced working cash bonds and stretched it over a longer period of time?
I don't even know the last time you did working cash bonds. You did some what they call funding bonds, I think, in 2002. Those are the ones we just refinanced to get the interest rate.
All right.
But we didn't extend it. We felt like that was not a thing to do. We didn't want to, just keep borrowing that money. We wanted to, if we were going to do it, refinance, and we just wanted to make the savings on the interest and pay them out just like they were designed to be paid out.
But the answer to my question is that the board could if they needed to.
They could if they needed to. We're not anticipating a need like that, but that's a good question.
You've been very good tonight.
Thank you.
I would also, do you have one more? Okay.
I just wanted to follow up because there was somebody that said that we had financial prudence, so I want to say that Bud Martin's going to be missed because Bud did a lot to basically reduce in half the number of negative audit conditions. I know John Wood hardly had any for 13 years, and you cut them in half. You also did a lot of work with the checking accounts so that they are being balanced. That was not being done before you were here, and I appreciate that you were here. But back in 2009, because the question was brought up, said, oh, you have a record of fiscal prudence. Thanks to you, Bud, we've made some tremendous improvement, and you will be certainly missed here. But what was in the...
Thank you, Jeff.
Right. But I do have to follow up with what was the comment was that you have a history. I don't, quite honestly, I have to disagree, and this is what it says on the 2009 audit about the internal controls, and this is about the checking accounts. They said the cash and internal investments in the district should be reconciled from the bank records to the general ledger on a monthly basis. The condition was the district for 2009 was not reconciling the bank and investment accounts from the bank records to the general ledger on a monthly basis. And what the effect was, quote, the district's monthly financial statements and treasurer's report were inaccurate. The board's decisions may have changed if they had based those decisions on accurate information. Thanks to you, that has been corrected, and I want you to be thanked. But I think it should be known, this is not that long ago, only 3 years ago, they were not even reconciling their bank statements. So, but anyway, thank you very much for all you've done for us.
Thanks to the League of Women Voters of Adams County and District 8 PTA for sponsoring this forum, and to Quincy University for its use of the Hall of Fame room. Thanks for watching, and remember to vote on March 20th.